I lied about getting fired to see my husband's true colors, and they weren't what I expected. The day I decided to test my husband, my heart pounded harder than it did on my actual first day at work. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? A wife, deliberately setting a trap for the man she shares her life with. But I had been feeling unsettled for months. Little comments he made about money, about my job, about my worth. They weren't obvious insults, more like tiny cracks in the wall of our marriage. A sarcastic remark here, a dismissive shrug there. I told myself I was overthinking, but a part of me needed to know. If everything I contributed to our life was stripped away, would he still stand by me? Or would he finally reveal something I had always feared? That's why, one rainy Thursday evening, I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to look broken. When he came home, drenched from the storm, I didn't greet him with my usual smile. Instead, I clutched a fake letter I had typed up earlier and whispered, "James, I got fired today." For a moment, silence filled the room. He froze near the doorway, his coat still dripping. I expected him to rush to me, to wrap his arms around me, to tell me everything would be okay. That's what love is, right? Reassurance in times of weakness. But instead, his jaw tightened, and he let out a sharp exhale. "You're kidding," he muttered, tossing his keys onto the counter. "Do you realize what this means for us? The mortgage, the bills, the plans we made. How could you let this happen?" The words hit me harder than I expected, even though this was all a lie. I felt small, like a child being scolded for breaking something precious. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't even ask what happened. His first instinct was blame. His eyes weren't filled with worry for me, they were filled with disappointment for himself. I tried to keep my role going, my voice trembling as I said, "I did everything I could, James. I really tried." I let my tears flow, but they weren't entirely fake anymore. Something inside me cracked at that moment. Maybe I had wanted to test him, but I wasn't prepared for the answer. He sat across from me, rubbing his temples, his frustration louder than his silence. "Unbelievable. I should have known this would happen. You've been so distracted lately. I can't believe I have to carry this weight now." He didn't look at me as a partner, he looked at me as a burden. That night, I cried myself to sleep with my back turned to him. The rain tapped against the window, almost like it was trying to comfort me, but the bed felt colder than ever. My husband's breathing beside me was steady, almost peaceful, as if nothing monumental had happened. I realized then, he didn't love me for who I was, he loved me for what I provided. The next morning, he acted as if the world hadn't shifted. He made coffee, read his emails, and left for work without a single word of reassurance. I sat there staring at the untouched cup he had poured for me, wondering when my marriage had turned into this fragile, conditional arrangement. By the third day, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "James," I said as he walked through the door, "I need to tell you the truth. I didn't get fired." He turned sharply, confusion flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I lied. I needed to see how you would react if I had nothing. If I lost my job, if I couldn't contribute financially, would you still love me? Would you still support me? That's why I did it." His face shifted from shock to anger. "You lied to me. You made me believe you were unemployed just to play some twisted game." His voice thundered through the room. "Yes," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "But don't you see? It wasn't a game. It was a desperate cry for the truth. And I got it." He froze then, his chest rising and falling heavily. "So what, you think I failed some kind of test?" "I think," I said softly, "that you showed me where your love ends." And that's the truth I didn't want, but needed to see. The days that followed were heavy with silence. He avoided me, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of anger. But for me, clarity had already set in. I started to replay our years together, the times he made me feel like I wasn't enough, the times he measured my worth by what I earned instead of who I was. And suddenly, the picture became clearer. This test wasn't just about one lie. It was about the foundation of our marriage. And that foundation had already been cracked long before I ever sat at that kitchen table. Eventually, I made a decision. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of love for myself. I packed a small bag, wrote him a letter explaining everything I felt, and walked away. I left not because I hated him, but because I refused to keep living in a love that only thrived when I was useful. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done. I doubted myself 1,000 times, but in those doubts, I also found strength. Because when you strip everything else away, jobs, money, appearances, what matters most is how someone treats your soul. And James showed me that my soul didn't matter to him. But here's the twist: the story doesn't end in heartbreak. It ends in rebirth. Months later, I discovered a version of myself I had long buried. I started pursuing passions I had put aside. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from. And slowly, I began to heal. If there's one message I want to leave behind, it's this: sometimes the hardest truths come from the most painful tests. We often fear the answers, but those answers set us free. I lied about being fired, and in return, I lost the marriage I thought would last forever. But I gained something more precious. I gained the courage to demand love that sees me for who I am, not for what I provide. And that, in the end, is a truth worth holding on to.